Yo, what's going on, guys? It is your boy Nick here, back again with a brand new video today. We're going to be continuing my series in which I review every single Marvel Cinematic Universe film up to the release of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Today we're going to be reviewing Avengers Endgame, which is the 10th film in Phase 3. So Avengers Endgame was once again directed by the Russo brothers, who also directed Avengers Infinity War, and it stars all of our original Avengers cast with Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, Chris Hemsworth, Mark Ruffalo, and Scarlett Johansson. The way that Avengers Infinity War ended, it ended with all of our original Avengers being the only ones to survive, so it was really interesting to kind of see that they were going to have to be the ones to solve this problem. Also, Jeremy Renner finally makes his return as Hawkeye, which is great considering he wasn't in Infinity War. It's cool to see that he survived the blip and he was good and everything's fine. So Jeremy Renner's return as Hawkeye was awesome. Paul Rudd also returns as Ant-Man from Ant-Man and the Wasp. That was awesome. He survived the blip too. And it was cool to see him in this one as well because he also was not in Infinity War, so it's cool to have Paul Rudd back. As well as some other people who survived the blip. We have Don Cheadle as James Rhodes or War Machine. Not technically one of the original 6 Avengers, but he's an original MCU character as we've seen him all the way back from Iron Man, or technically Iron Man 2, but Iron Man. Also Bradley Cooper's Rocket survived too. So that's like our main cast there. Oh, I forgot to mention also Karen Gillian's Nebula. That's our main cast in the film. They all do a great job. And it's interesting how it's these select few people who have to clean up everything that happened in Infinity War, and they're going to be the main group for Avengers Endgame. It's interesting because like the stakes have never been higher for them, even though the worst has already come. And it's just interesting to see them all work together, especially considering that some of these people had actually never met before. So that was cool. And I don't know, they all work together really well, so I gotta give them credit for that. Oh yeah, also Brie Larson returns as Captain Marvel. I forgot to mention that. I have it listed here though. Before I go into things I loved about the movie, I'm just going to list some other stuff that I thought was good. Alan Silvestri's score was amazing once again. His score has always been great for the Avengers, but this time around it's really great and it works with the scenes so well, and I love the fact that this man has scored our films. This film also has a really excellent, hopeless, and gritty tone. I mean, we already kind of had that with Avengers Infinity War, but this time it's like a lot more somber, I guess. And I think that the tone works very well with the story that they're setting up. And the last 2 things I'm going to talk about before I go into spoilers. And so if you haven't seen this film and want to avoid spoilers, you should click off pretty soon. And that's the fact that this film has phenomenal payoff. It is a huge scale, and it's movie magic done right. Like, the stuff that they do here truly is mind-blowing, and this is really the best example of long-term storytelling having an excellent payoff is Avengers Endgame. And there's also a film where this is fan service done right. If you ever want to know how to do fan service, watch Avengers Endgame. That's how you do it. So now that the stuff's out the way, we're going to go into spoilers now. So if you haven't seen Avengers Endgame, click off the video now. We're going into spoilers. I have warned you. Now, actually, I have a long list of stuff I want to talk about because there's so much that happened in this movie. I'll try and go through them as quickly as possible with also giving a good enough review of these different things. First thing I have listed is the time travel. This is kind of one of those things that, like, whenever the film was coming out, I wasn't sure what exactly they were going to do to try to fix what happened in Infinity War, and then when I saw the time travel stuff, it made me kind of nervous at first, but then when I saw it, they did the time travel stuff really well. All the different places they went to get the Infinity Stones, very well executed, and I think the writers did a fantastic job doing the time travel stuff. Something else I find interesting is Thanos' death at the beginning of the movie, because Thanos survived Infinity War, even though he was this close from dying. I love how at the beginning of Endgame he dies, but that's clearly not the end of the film. But it was such a shock when it happened, and the fact that Thor finally went for the head, interesting, just really interesting to think about. And I don't know, but like us seeing that was kind of a shock, and I kind of like how it capped off Thor's arc for Infinity War. Speaking of stuff with Thor, I also have Thor's hammer listed here. That means multiple stuff. First of it means him going back and getting the original hammer before it broke from the Thor the Dark World stuff. I thought that was cool. And speaking of Thor's hammer, Captain America being able to grab Thor's hammer, dude, that is still one of my favorite scenes in the entire MCU. I remember seeing that in theaters. I saw the hammer floating thing that was going to go to Thor, and I went to Captain America, who's my favorite superhero of all time, and I freaking lost it. I loved it so much. I still love it now. I geek out about it when I think about it. And I remember when I was in the theater, I was just getting ready to lose it. And my sister was like sitting there next to me saying, like, you need to calm down. You are like making a scene. And I was like, do you not see what's happening? This is incredible. This is real. Like, man, as a Captain America fan, I love that scene so much. Now, of course, we're talking about Avengers Endgame. You have to talk about the climactic battle. This, in my opinion, is probably the best climactic battle I've ever seen put to film. And that's really saying something. It goes up against the Battle of Hogwarts in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. It goes up against the Battle of Helm's Deep in the Two Towers, or the final battle at the end of Return of the King, or the Battle of the Bastards in Game of Thrones. It goes up against so many of that stuff, and I just, in all honesty, the fact that Avengers Endgame had this battle, it's like, the fact that they were able to pull it off so well is what amazes me. But the reason I feel like this is the best battle I've ever seen is because it truly is like the best payoff and most satisfying payoff for a franchise this long running. And it was so cool to have a battle this huge scope where everybody returned, with the exception of a few people, which I'll get to in a second. But all the people that we lost in Infinity War came back after they brought everyone back with the stones. And my god, dude, I remember sitting in the theater and seeing the first portal opened up where Black Panther and Shuri and Okoye walked through, and I was so happy to see them. I remember like the whole theater clapping at that point. I remember whenever the other portal opened up, we saw Strange and Drax and Mantis and Star-Lord. Then Spider-Man came through. Everyone was going crazy during that and just clapping and clapping and clapping and yelling, because I remember how sad we all were when we lost Spider-Man in Infinity War. So, just the fan service and the actual just like, oh my god, I can't believe this is happening in a film like this is just, and it was an amazing experience. It's one of the best theater experiences I've ever had, and I think about it now and I still just like, I can't believe it. It's like, I still have a hard time believing this movie exists sometimes because of how well they did this final battle where everyone was there. Unfortunately, we did have some deaths in this movie. First off, I'm going to talk about Black Widow's death, which it makes a lot of sense for the sake of the film. I remember thinking to myself that Hawkeye probably would have been the one to die at the thing for the Soul Stone, but then they kind of reasoned it out a little bit more. I was like, okay, it makes sense for Black Widow to die, which was sad, and I was sad that Black Widow didn't make it to the final battle, considering she's one of the best characters in the franchise. But for the sake of the story, I get it, and of course, when it comes to deaths, Iron Man, dude. Oh, whenever Iron Man died, that was so sad when that happened. Actually, I watched this film like 2 nights ago, so I could prepare for this review, and I cried so hard when Iron Man died. It was interesting, because Iron Man's not my favorite superhero, but he's one of the best characters. He's the longest running character, because he started the franchise and it ended with him. And just seeing like the whole arc that he goes through up until now is like a phenomenal arc. So whenever he dies, it pays off well, but it just breaks your heart at the same time. The whole funeral scene, oh my lord, I could not control my emotions during that. I also loved Captain America's destiny of this thing. It was cool to see Captain America go back and live the life that he wanted to live, but it's the fact that he earned it. It wasn't just, let me go back and do this. He freaking earned it, and I was so glad they made it more of a thing of like, Cap earned this, let him have it. And also Falcon being the new Captain America. I love that. I think it's cool that Captain America is going to outlive Steve Rogers, and I think that Sam Wilson is honestly the best person for the job. I know a lot of people thought Bucky would have been the one to get it, and I understand it would have been a lot more emotional for Bucky because Bucky's Steve's a longtime friend, but realistically, because Bucky was under brain control from Hydra, who committed terrorist attacks, completely out of his control, by the way, if he became Captain America, the public would be like, no, why is this former terrorist Captain America? So I thought it made more sense for them to give it to Falcon. I think it paid off pretty well. And this one means a lot more since the film's already a few years old, but this was Chadwick Boseman's last live-action performance as T'Challa. Not technically his last performance because he was in What If, but his last live-action performance, this was it. And that made the film all that more emotional for me. The whole Yabambe thing where everyone comes out was so awesome, and it had so much more emotional depth to it now that Chadwick is unfortunately gone. Rest in peace. I like the fact that Ant-Man played a central role in the story, because Ant-Man was a good movie, and Ant-Man and the Wasp was also really good. They didn't really feel like they had a whole lot to do with the universe as a whole, but the fact that they incorporated it into this film as a central plot point, I really appreciate it, because I've been waiting for that for a while, and they executed it very well. Speaking of other stuff, I got Loki and the Tesseract. Loki was choked to death in the first one. I said, is Loki even really gone? I guess he might not actually really be gone, because the Tesseract from 2012, the fact that and it seems like he probably had enough time to get away with it and change stuff to the point that he's probably going to live on. I don't know, that was just an interesting thing to see. And also, speaking of dead characters who came back, 2014 Gamora. I thought it was cool that Gamora made it to the final battle, but it's the fact that it wasn't Gamora from the future who died. It was the Gamora from 2014. But I don't know, it's still cool to see her there, and I'm wondering what they're going to do with her in the future, because we still don't know, actually. I also loved Thor's last one with Frigga. If you guys know, Thor the Dark World is, of all the movies I've reviewed thus far, my least favorite MCU movie. It's fine, and one of my complaints is that I felt like when Frigga died in that movie, that it didn't feel like it had a whole lot of emotional weight to it, and I thought they could have done a little bit better. I like the fact that they had more payoff for this one. I feel like Thor the Dark World retconned this scene, and it was cool to finally see something from Thor the Dark World that should have worked in that film, work in this film, and I loved Thor's last moments with her before her destiny in Thor the Dark World, so I love the fact that they did that. Now, speaking of retconning stuff, Harley, played by Ty Simpkins from Iron Man 3, coming to the funeral. I thought that was really sweet. I thought that was a really good idea of them. I remember sitting in the theater, and I saw them panning by everyone, and then I see, like, this random kid. I'm like, Who's a random kid? Oh, it's Potato Gun Kid from Iron Man 3. And even though he's a small part of the MCU, he was someone who Tony impacted, and he's all grown up now, and he's probably doing what he does in life because of Tony Stark, so it was cool to see him there. I also love this movie did with Professor Hulk. It's interesting because Hulk's arc started off as him not being able to control his emotions, and then the last movie was him not being able to get angry, and the fact that at this time he's actually at like a perfect balance state where he can be himself, control himself, but also still be strong and smash stuff. So I thought the Professor Hulk thing, it was a risk, but I thought it was a risk very well done. And speaking of risks, I also have the big Thor Bowski. This is one of those things that whenever it happened, it was kind of just like, I guess funny to see the God of Thunder had let himself go. But I actually really liked what they did with the big Thor Bowski, because like the message of that was, doesn't matter what you look like or what you've gone through, you can be a hero. And they executed that very well. I thought it was cool to have a superhero who didn't need to be all fit and shredded in order to do something heroic. I thought that was a good message they put in the movie. I also love seeing Ant-Man reunite with Cassie after him spending 5 years, or 5 hours I guess, in the quantum realm and him being presumed dead. It was cool that whenever he finally made it out, thanks to the rat's a hero, the fact that his daughter survived and the fact that he got to reunite with his daughter, I was so happy to see that. That was a very heartfelt moment in the movie. I also love the fact that Tony got to start a family, and it's sad that his family's going to have to without him. But the fact that he got to start a family before he went was really awesome. I felt really happy for him there. And also just listed among everything I have here, had the fact that this film's perfectly acted. This is the same thing I said with Infinity War. These two films really show you that there was not a single miscasting with any of these characters, and that when they cast them back when they all did the original movies, they really they did what they were supposed to do, and it paid off perfectly. And all these actors have great chemistry together, and they play the characters perfectly. The emotions are there. And, my God, you just got to give them all the credit. Now, there's also some interesting stuff that we found out that we didn't know about in Infinity War when they were going through people who blipped. We found out that Shuri blipped, and thankfully she came back, and also Jane Foster blipped, and so did Eric Selvig, which I thought was interesting. But, now that the blip was undone, they're all back, so that's cool. But I don't know, it was just kind of cool that there was, more lore to it than I thought it was cool to just put it in there, because there was, so many things where it's okay, we don't know if exactly who blipped and who hasn't, just from Infinity War. So it's cool to see, oh yeah, this character blipped and this character blipped and this one survived. I thought it was cool how they just set that up there. Also, I love the female team up in this movie. I thought it was cool that when it was, I believe it was Valkyrie who had to get the gauntlet across a thing. The fact that all the female superheroes lined up there in the army was really cool. It's sad that Black Widow couldn't be there. It really is, but the fact that everyone else was there, I thought was really cool. It was an awesome moment in the film. I also love Tony's last moment with Howard Stark, as Tony's relationship with Howard Stark was horrible from the beginning, so I thought it was cool how he got to time travel back to before Howard Stark had kids, and he got to have a nice moment with him. I thought that was really sweet. And speaking of that whole sequence, I also loved seeing the retro Ant-Man helmet at the facility, as well as a very young Michael Douglas. I thought that was a really cool little detail they put in there. Also, Stan Lee's final cameo. I also just realized today that I've talked about every single MCU movie up to this point, and I've never talked about Stan Lee, which is crazy, but I always looked forward to Stan Lee's cameos in these films, and seeing his final cameo in this movie was, it was sad, but it was fun. It was cool to see him there, and it was a really brilliantly done cameo, which I liked. And even though Captain Marvel doesn't come out all too much in the movie, I thought her incorporation in the film was awesome, and I loved the part where she joins the showdown, and the part where she was able to hold Thanos' gauntlet open, and the failed headbutt from Thanos. Oh, that was awesome. I know Thor was technically the strongest Avenger, but I think Captain Marvel takes the crown for that now. I don't know. I talked about if you guys saw my Captain Marvel review, you guys know that I liked the movie. I thought it could have been a little bit better. I thought they made her a lot cooler in this one, and even though it was just a few sequences, I thought it was really cool, and I can't wait to see what they do with her in the future. The Asgardians of the Galaxy, seeing Thor join the Guardians of the Galaxy is cool, and they haven't really done a whole lot with that yet. I'm saying this from a present tense, but I hope they end up doing more with it, because I really do want to see Thor and Guardians of the Galaxy do more stuff together. It was also cool to see Thor pass on the new King of Asgard to Valkyrie, and if you ask me, I think Valkyrie earned it. I mean, she's a warrior. She held her own during Ragnarok. She held her own here, and I think she deserved it. So yeah, I'm happy for Valkyrie. Also seeing Spider-Man reunite with Ned, that was so cool. And also, it was interesting to find out that Ned was also another person who blipped, aside from just Peter Parker, because we end up finding out later, I won't go too much into it, that when people blipped, they stayed the same age that they were when they were gone. But the fact that Spider-Man and Ned both blipped, and the fact that they both now have to go back to high school together, is it's interesting about that thing where it's kind of sweet and sad at the same time, because it's nice to think that Ned didn't just spend the next 5 years wondering what happened to Peter, and the fact that they still get to be friends together makes me really happy for the two of them, and that was just a sweet scene there. It was also cool to see the Ancient One, played by Tilda Swinton, return in 2012, because we didn't find out anything about Doctor Strange until 2016, but it's cool to see that within the lore, these people have existed for all these years, and it's cool to see the fact that she was there behind the scenes a little bit in the Avengers, which was cool. I also love seeing Hawkeye reunite with his family. I thought that was really sweet. And another thing I have listed, and there's probably stuff I'm forgetting, but these are all just stuff I personally love. The final thing I have listed was seeing Pepper Potts finally suit up, because we see earlier on that Tony's been building stuff for her forever and she just never bothers to use it. It was cool that for the final battle she used it, so that was awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed the whole spoiler talk of Avengers Endgame. I don't know, these are all just things that I just love about the movie, and I talk about all these scenes. They're things that as a Marvel fan I love, and they're all so well executed, and it's so nice to just see all these things pay off the way they do. This is like probably the perfect payoff movie ever. I do have some flaws in the movie, not necessarily flaws that I personally have, but flaws that some people might have. I put that some of the humor may not work for everyone, as it is part of an era. The main one being the Fortnite on a PS4, played by Korg. When I saw it in theaters, I thought it was hilarious. What's funny is that we're actually now living in 2023, which is when Avengers Endgame takes place after the time jump. And so, what's funny is that Fortnite is still, I mean, it's not as popular as it was back when this film came out, but it's still popular. It still has a lot of people playing it. I thought it was funny how he's playing on a PS4, because that's all that was out when the film was being made. But we have the PS5 now. But the fact that he's playing on a PS4 is a lot more realistic, because you can't even buy PS5s in 2023. So the jokes aged pretty well, in my opinion. I feel like it was that thing when it came out, people were like, oh, it's going to age so poorly, and it's actually aged perfectly well. I think that's hysterical. And then the big Thor Bowski, I talked about how I really liked what they did with him. I just know that for some people, they're not going to love the whole Thor Bowski thing. They're going to be like, oh, why did they make Thor not a shredded badass with these huge arms and abs, and like why did he not look that way? But again, like the whole message of Thor Bowski is that it doesn't matter what you look like or what you've gone through. If you do something heroic, you are a hero, and I think that's a great message there. And the other kind of flaw I have with the movie, this isn't necessarily something that I hate about Endgame, it's just something that I know some other people don't like about Endgame, is that it doesn't flow as well as Infinity War. It is a slower start than Infinity War, and I get it, and I understand that this film's longer than Infinity War, but me personally, I've actually always preferred Endgame over Infinity War. I understand the people who like Infinity War more, but I'm sorry, I gotta go with Endgame, because Endgame is the phenomenal, perfect final payoff after 11 years worth of movies, and they could not have done a better job, and that's why I personally like it better. But I understand why some people like Infinity War more, because Infinity War, from an objective standpoint, does flow better, so I will give you guys that. But all that out the way, Avengers Infinity War is a phenomenal superhero movie. It's, in my personal opinion, the best thing we've ever gotten from a comic book movie. It's, still my favorite Marvel movie even to this day. In all honesty, it's one of my favorite movies ever made. Everything about it was just perfect, in my opinion, in terms of paying off everything that we've seen up until this point. And even though you could nitpick the MCU to death and talk about little things in all these movies that don't work, like I've done in all my reviews, and maybe even little inconsistencies here and there, you could nitpick it to death, but whenever you look at the emotional impact that these films have, as well as the characters and their arcs, and all the payoff they see in Avengers Endgame, in all honesty, you have to give everyone who worked on this phenomenal film franchise a round of applause like I do. And it's that thing where it's like the flaws are so minor in this massive scope that you can overlook it. That's why I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's why I love Avengers Endgame. Of course, I'm going to give Avengers Endgame an overall rating of a 10 out of 10. No questions about that. No doubts. No denying that. It is an excellent film. It's extremely entertaining. I was never bored, and I'm giving it an overall grade of an A+. It is a phenomenal superhero movie, and it's one for the ages. So that was my review of Avengers Endgame. Make sure that you tune into my channel just a few more days to watch my review of the next movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Spider-Man Far From Home. Hope you guys enjoyed the review. Make sure that you hit the like button, hit the subscribe, hit the notification bell so you get notified about my latest videos. Leave a comment down below letting me know what you thought. And yeah, that's been it. Peace.